Long ago, humans and monsters fought a war. No one remembered why it started, so peace was eventually established. Years later, Dr. Glenn, a human, and his half-cynic assistant Safi treat monster girls. While both are skilled, Dr. Glenn is overzealous about his patients' health, ignoring their privacy. Safi, who has a crush on him, doesn't like this. They get a request from Dr. Kfuli, a half-octopus, half-human famous doctor, to visit the arena and look after her patients. Safi is anxious because the arena has attractive monster girls. True to her worries, Dr. Glenn examines Tazalia Scythia, a centaur and the only daughter of Scythian transportation, who seems healthy. But her attendants, Kay and Lorna, tell Glenn that Tazalia has been losing matches. Dr. Glenn observes a match and finds the issue is with her hooves. After a difficult confrontation, they manage to put iron hooves on Tazalia, which leads her to win the next day. The story then flashes back to the war where Safi was once held hostage by Glenn's family, becoming friends before being separated and later reunited in medical school. Next, they shot at the Merrill Waterways, a city built by Dragon Lady Scotty. Safi sees it as a romantic outing, but Glenn only views it as a supply run. When they reach the city, a mermaid named Leela calls them a cute couple and invites them over. Glenn is suspicious, but agrees to hear a song. When Leela can't finish due to coughing, he examines her and finds out she's sick because she's been out of water too long. Suddenly, a boy falls into the river. Leela saves him but exhausts herself. When she starts drowning, Glenn dives in to save her. After some first aid, both Leela and the boy are okay. A few days later, Leela has a new job and develops a crush on Glenn. Meanwhile, a woman named Kanai, who's like a DI or Frankenstein, is chasing criminals but gets trapped. Glenn and Safi are treating a too-hot slime girl when Lady Sketty and Kanai visit. Kanai has lost an arm and needs it reattached, but she's distrustful of doctors except for Safi. She leaves to find her arm herself and gets trapped again by the same criminals. Glenn, determined to help, searches for Kanai's missing arm. He runs into Tazalia, who found not the arm but Kanai's leg. He examines the leg to see if it's in good condition. Glenn examines Kanai's leg and wonders if the people who made her were real doctors or just amateurs with sewing kits. He later finds Leela, who has Kanai's arm, and gives it to him. Glenn finds Kanai, fixes her arm and leg, and maybe solves the issue of hearing voices from the body parts used to make her. Back at the clinic, Safi tries to prank Glenn by saying she's pregnant but fails. They discover an unfertilized harpy egg, essentially just a big outlet. Soon, bandits attack the clinic. Safi fights them off. More bandits come, and Kanai helps Safi and Glenn. They learn the bandits are kidnapping harpies to sell their eggs. They can't get help from the city, so they team up with Kanai, Scotty, and Leela. Archers attack them, but Tazalia saves the day. While Kanai and Tazalia fight outside, the doctors find the captured harpies inside. One harpy is in pain from a stuck egg. Glenn helps her, while Safi fights more bandits. Safi remembers her past, where her family wanted her to spy on and possibly kill Glenn's family. She gets stabbed by a poison knife and falls unconscious, but wakes up soon after. After the slavers are caught, and the harpy egg is safely laid, Safi decides to confess her past to Glenn. However, he already knew and still wanted to be friends. Safi ties up Glenn with her tail, but falls asleep before anything else happens. The next day, they go to a harpy village to help. During a rock slide, Kay gets hurt and is flown to the village by male harpies. Glenn checks Kay's injury, finding it to be a mild sprain. He spends the day treating various issues in the village. Later, he talks to Lorna, who is anxious. He discovers her anxiety is mental, not physical, and binds her to make her feel calm, which works. Kay and Lorna later offer themselves to Glenn, saying their mistress Tazalia wants to marry him. Glenn resists and declines. They visit Illy, a harpy who lost her ability to fly due to a past incident. Glenn finds that she's not sick, she's just losing feathers. Illy gets mad at Glenn's diagnosis that she's molting and challenges Teslia to a fight. Teslia wins and gives one of Illy's feathers to Glenn. Glenn then figures out that Illy has phoenix blood and is growing new, stronger feathers. A few days later, Illy flies with new rainbow wings. Before leaving the village, Glenn and Safi give the harpies some wing and claw care tips. They then encounter Irania, a spider woman who's also Safi's friend. Irania is excited about the harpies and wants to touch Illy's feathers. The next day, the women go to hot springs, leaving Glenn alone at the clinic. Irania tries to seduce Glenn, but Teslia rescues him. Safi scolds both and takes Glenn back to the clinic. There, Safi confesses her love for Glenn. Suddenly, they hear loud noises and see the giant goddess Gigas approaching. Everyone is scared and ready to flee. Teslia leads the escape and Illy flies to another town for help. Glenn and others prepare to leave but realize Teslia is missing. She's gone to fight the goddess alone. Teslia wants to impress Glenn by defeating the goddess Dione, but Safi and Glenn stop her. It turns out Dione just has a cold. Glenn treats her and Irania makes her warm clothes. Back home, Teslia, thinking she's on a date with Glenn, says she'd die for him. But then Safi joins them. The next day, they attend a ceremony at the Marrow Waterways. Glenn notices something off with Skitty's tail just before she faints. After giving her first aid, she's taken to the hospital. At the hospital, Dr. Cathali, Skitty's main physician, won't share her medical records with Glenn. She tells them that Skitty has a rare, dangerous disease causing spikes in her blood pressure. Back at their clinic, Kanai agrees with Glenn that Skitty needs treatment even against her will. Glenn says he would need to examine Skitty thoroughly, and Kanai suggests doing so in her bedroom. When Safi hears that Glenn has to examine Skitty in her bedroom, she gets nervous, but Glenn calms her down, saying he's done home visits before. Inside the room, Skitty reveals she has a cancerous heart tumor connected to her veins, giving her 2 hearts. She thinks it's her fate, given her dragon ancestors' bloody past, and refuses treatment. Despite Skitty's reluctance, Glenn is determined to help. He examines her scales, tail, and wings. Skitty gets emotional and Kanai rushes in, creating a tense moment. But Skitty says she's going to bed. The next day, Glenn and Safi ask Dr. Cathali for surgical help. She initially refuses but agrees when Glenn persuades her. They then recruit Irania for her sewing skills, convincing her with the offer of a nurse uniform. Kanai tries again to convince Skitty to have surgery, but she's still resistant. Glenn visits a workshop to request special medical tools. Meme, a one-eyed monster, takes him to her boss. Glenn secures a deal for the equipment but learns they may not have the right needles for dragon scales. Back at the clinic, Irania stitches up Kanai while Safi asks for some alcohol, tired after a long day. Safi won't give Irania alcohol until after the surgery. Kanai says she couldn't convince Skitty for surgery. She feels her mission is complete and it's her time to go. Glenn offers to help convince her next time, but Irania suggests they need a new approach. Dr. Cathali and Glenn check out the surgical tool prototypes and approve, although the needles are still in progress. Glenn recalls his first surgery and appreciates Cathali's tough teaching. Meme works hard on the needles, inspired by Skitty's work in transforming the workshop from making weapons to medical tools. Meme collapses from overwork but insists on completing the needles. She wakes up in Glenn's clinic and it turns out she had motion sickness from intense focus. She shows everyone the new steel needles she made, impressing everyone. Glenn removes dragon scales from his bag, not wanting to offend Skitty. He tries again to convince her to undergo surgery. Back at the clinic, Safi is jealous of Irania's improved skills. Glenn remembers he has to visit Dr. Cathali and rushes out. Irania tells Safi that Glenn will always return to her. Safi and Irania and Tessalia go out for a girls' night. They discuss using herbs and alcohol from the East as anesthesia for Skitty's surgery. Irania gets drunk and declares them best friends. Back home, Safi catches Irania trying to steal Glenn's dragon scales. She's disappointed and says she can't tolerate theft. Irania panics and tries to escape, but Tessalia is outside. Tessalia blocks one exit and Safi blocks another, cornering Irania, who eventually gives up. Safi talks to her, understanding her stress triggered her stealing habit. Irania admits to possessiveness. Safi says it's not just about the scales, it's also about testing their friendship over Glenn. They make amends, realizing Irania has feelings for Glenn. Glenn visits Scotty, who explains her reluctance for surgery but agrees to it after Glenn persuades her. On surgery day, there's a hiccup with Scotty's body heat, but it's successfully managed, and the surgery is a success. The city celebrates and Scotty thanks everyone, but Glenn misses the ceremony to treat Safi, who has mouth blisters. Scotty finds Glenn outside and thanks him. Meme fixes Scotty's broken carriage and is thanked for her help in surgery. Glenn leaves wine barrels he received as thanks with Meme and goes to treat a patient. At the clinic, Irania and Safi make dinner, competing for Glenn's favor. Elsewhere, a giant goddess helps villagers and gives them food. Meme is left awkwardly guarding wine barrels. When Glenn returns, there's tension and jealousy among the women in his life. The clinic is crowded with people bringing gifts and food for Glenn. Everyone has a feast, but Safi gets jealous, pulling Scotty away from Glenn with her tail. Tessalia intervenes and the girls playfully fight for Glenn's attention.